all of a sudden something very big came crashing down the hill towards us. It started screeching like a chimpanzee is the best description I can give, and beating on its chest. It was breaking branches and running around in the tree line in front of us. I remember thinking, what the hell is that? I yelled at the guys, I was like, come on, let's get down here, and we climbed down into the ravine next to us. We stood there for probably 5 minutes back to back with our rifles, waiting for this thing to come at us. And I honestly really don't remember anything after this point. I know that we left, but I don't remember the walk out of the woods. I don't remember the rest of that entire day. I don't know. I've never been back to that area. Not since. I've never gone back there. In all honesty, it's the scariest I've ever been in the woods. In 20 plus years of hiking and fishing and everything. It's the scariest I've ever been. I'm 35 now. This happened around 20 years ago. I'm not positive the exact year. I believe I was about a freshman in high school or 8th grade. And me and two of my friends decided to go out squirrel hunting. It was September 1st or right around that time. I assume it was September 1st because the leaves were still on the trees. But the one friend that I went with, his stepdad, I think, runs the shooting range in town, basically. So he had access to the land, and that's where we went to hunt. And it's about 3 or 4 miles from Lansing, actually, the city border or the town line.
Uh-huh.
And we went out to this spot, and I really don't remember much about walking up the hill or anything like that. I just remember going into the area, parking at a certain parking spot, like a field gate basically, and then walking up onto this hill. And we were kind of in I would say it was 100 by 50 clearing, 100 yards by 50 yard clearing, kind of on the side of this hill. And there's a shallow ditch, probably 10 or 12 feet deep on our right. And all of a sudden, we're about in the middle of this clearing, and all of a sudden, something very big came crashing down the hill towards us, and it never got in close enough that we could see it, but it started screeching like a chimpanzee is the best description I can give, but lower in tone, a little bit deeper sounding, and beating on its chest, and it was there's no mistaking, a lot of people have said oh, it was probably just a ruffed grouse. I know what a ruffed grouse sounds like. They sound like an old tractor starting up.
Yeah.
This was not that. This was whatever it was huge, and it was a primate. And it was breaking branches and running around in the tree line in front of us. And so the three of us, I remember thinking, what the hell is that? And so I yelled at the guys, I was like, come on, let's get down here. And we climbed down into the ravine next to us. And we stood there for probably 5 minutes back to back with our rifles, waiting for this thing to come at us. And the noise basically just kind of faded away. And so I honestly really don't remember anything after this point. I know that we left immediately, but I don't remember the walk out of the woods. I don't remember the rest of that entire day, which is something that really throws me.
So you think it's definitely something strange and not just you just don't happen to remember what happened?
No, I think something definitely strange happened because one of the other guys that was with me that day, he doesn't remember at all.
Wow.
I haven't been able to reach the third one, but it just strikes me as an event like that. I should be able to remember everything up to it and after it, but it's almost it sounds weird, but it's almost like my memory's wiped about it. Like it's just something that affected me so profoundly that I don't know. I've never been back to that area, not since. I mean, I've driven by there a few times and stuff, but I've never gone back there. I don't know if I will, frankly.
Now, this shooting range, it was like an outdoor range?
Yeah, it's a very small town. Lansing's like 1,000 people. There's maybe somebody there shooting like 2 or 3 times a year, maybe more, a little bit more.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that's where I remember when we did our hunter safety out there when I was a kid, when I was like a little bit before that, and I remember having an eerie feeling about the place. Like it was just quiet, and there was something creepy about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I know people have reported having eerie feelings or dead silence in the woods and stuff like that. And the shooting range is like, it's in the middle of the woods, basically. Like it's on a gravel road. It's right on the edge of the gravel road, but all the way around it is woods, and on the other side is swamp. So it's very remote.
So, like, did you grow up, hunting and fishing and stuff out in the outdoors?
Yes, absolutely, all the time. Like hunting and fishing, or like hunting, fishing, hiking, camping, a little bit of bushcraft, basically mushroom hunting, a little bit of ginseng hunting.
Yeah. So,
like, I know the woods, and there's nothing that makes a noise, anything even close to that. That's not like, something completely different. I mean, I've also actually just the other day, I walked up on the hill behind my house, and I heard a wood knock right when I got like halfway up the hill, like to where there's like a big, like a real thicket. Mm-hmm. I heard a wood knock just behind it. And then I didn't see any animals the rest of the time I was up on the hill. And I always see deer up there, and I always see lots of birds, all kinds of stuff.
And where do you live in relation to where this encounter took place? I live at the time I was living like right on Main Street in Lansing, which is like roughly 5 miles from the place. But like Lansing, like I say, Lansing's a really small town. It's entirely surrounded by forest. The entire thing is. Uh-huh. And so this is like, there's a road called Columbus Road. It's like 2 miles south, and then it's another mile to the west out that road, or better, probably 2 miles. But like I lived probably a mile or 5 miles north of that. Okay, so not too far away from where it was.
No, not far at all. Like right now, if I walk up on the hill behind my house, I can actually see the spot where it happened.
Oh, wow.
From my house. And I'm only like 4 or 5 blocks closer.
And now Lansing is in northeastern Iowa, near Minnesota and Wisconsin. What kind of terrain is it?
It's hills. It's that part of the driftless region, so it's very hilly. There's a lot of really thick deciduous forest, a lot of bluffs, and the Mississippi is basically the border. So it's there's tons of creeks and ponds, and there's definitely the biodiversity here to support an animal like that, which is. I know that's a big thing. Yeah,
for sure. You mentioned in the email that you kind of had a theory as to why you had that type of encounter. You think it was because of the relationship to the gun range itself?
I do. I honestly do. Because I've heard of a lot of encounters with hunters where they'll have similar encounters. I heard somebody, I wasn't sure, I'm not sure if it was on your show or another show I was listening to last night, but they were talking about how they thought that they understood what guns were, like just last night. And I was like, I know that that's what it is, because if they've been staying out there for any period of time, they've seen people shooting out there. They shoot clays and they have regular targets out there, but, so they know what guns are. And I think that's why it reacted so violently. Like it was protecting a nesting site or protecting its family.
Did you feel threatened at the time?
Oh, definitely. I in all honesty, it's the scariest I've ever been in the woods.
in 20 plus years of hiking and fishing and everything. It's the scariest I've ever been.
I can hear the emotion in your voice. Is this event, does it still bother you 20 years later?
It does. It absolutely does. Absolutely. I used to do a lot more deer hunting and a lot more like hiking in places that I was not familiar with, and now I'm nervous about going into the woods sometimes. And I'm an avid outdoorsman. I love it. So it's been really tough for me, frankly.
Now, since your encounter, have you like tried to understand this thing? Have you done a lot of research on the internet or talked to other people or anything?
A ton. I listen to shows like yours, and Buckeye Bigfoot is another one that I listen to. Mm-hmm. I find tons and tons of parallels with just the experience entirely. Like the bluff charges, like where people will have something come at them and not get close enough to see it. It's like exactly what happened. So it's like, the more and more I research into it, the more and more I think that they're a highly intelligent species.
And you said the other guys, you haven't been in touch with one, but the other one doesn't remember the event at all.
No. Yeah, he doesn't. And he's a police officer now. Iraq war veteran too. But I asked him recently, and he doesn't remember it at all. Which I thought was kind of strange because, I haven't been able to forget it. I can't get the noise out of my head that it made. It just was abrasive and scary as hell.
Do you think it's something he can't remember, or is it something that he's just not wanting to talk about?
I don't know. It's been close to 20 years, so I mean, it's entirely possible that he is avoiding the conversation because he's a police officer now. Mm-hmm. But I've known the guy for a long time, and I don't think that he'd be that way. He's always been really good to me.
Yeah. So you guys were squirrel hunting at the time.
Yep.
How long into the hunt were you whenever this happened?
It was probably like 15 minutes into the hike, basically.
So pretty quick. Very
quick. Like I don't remember seeing a squirrel before that or hearing really anything in the woods down there, which I thought was kind of strange because it's pretty. I mean, it's not remote because it's so close to town, but it's remote because there's like the closest house is like 3/4 of a mile away or better, and there's nothing behind it on the hill for quite a ways.
And did you guys have like 22 rifles? Is that what you're using?
Yeah. So it probably wouldn't have been much use for us to be standing back to back, but I figured if it's going to charge at us, we're going to, at least give it a scare or give it a fight.
Did you ever think about firing off a round, just try to scare it off or something?
No, it happened. It really didn't. I mean, the whole encounter, and I know how things slow down in your mind when they happen. Like, especially traumatic events like this, like, it wasn't very long. The encounter was like, at the most, like 5 minutes of it actually making noise. And then we immediately like retreated down into the ditch, and I don't remember much noise after that. The initial noises were really and that was probably only a minute long.
Whenever you first started hearing it, was it like up close? Was it off in the distance? What would you guess distance wise?
It honestly sounded like it was no more than like 20 or 30 yards past the edge of the clearing. Mm-hmm. And the edge of the clearing was like maybe 45 yards in front of us.
So pretty close then.
So, I mean, it was close.
Yeah.
I'm like, honestly, if they're like the tree line that it was on was really dense, and you can't see anything past it. You couldn't see anything off to the left hardly or anything off to the right. Basically, it was just this little clearing was open. And like everything else is pretty thick brush around it. I think what the reason for the clearing is because of that ditch that was by there. I mean, it's heavily canopied forest.
Do you remember what was going through your mind whenever you first started hearing it? Like, were you confused as to what you were hearing, or?
Well, I don't want to. I don't want to get you in trouble for swearing, but I remember thinking, what the F is that? and saying it audibly to everybody else that was around me. And they both looked at it. We both looked at each other. We all looked at each other. We all had like the same look of fear on our faces, and just terror.
Did you tell anybody about the event, like your parents or anything?
No, not until more recently. Like, in all honesty, I never even really realized, put two and two together, that it was probably a Bigfoot until probably 5 years ago, when my friend used to listen, we used to listen to Bigfoot, or Buckeye Bigfoot, before we went to sleep. We would just be kind of hanging out, and I was sleeping on one couch, he was sleeping on another. And there was, I can't remember what episode it was, but one of them, like, it clicked in my mind as like, holy shit, that's what that was. Because I had no idea what it was. I mean, it's obviously it sounds like a primate, but it's like there's not supposed to be any primates in the woods of North America.
Right. I mean, if Bigfoot's not on your radar and you encounter one and you don't get a visual of it like this, most people aren't even going to think about Bigfoot, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. And that, I've had more experiences more recently that I think that's probably what it was. And one of them was probably 6 or 7 miles from that spot further south, up over the hill, at another friend's house. We went rock hunting this one night. We used to go down in his valley by his house and his dad's farm. And he left before I did. It started to get dark as I was walking up the hill. It's probably a quarter mile from where we were rock hunting to his dad's house. And as I was walking up the hill, something was all the way around me, like doing like false charge, like running up, like I could hear the footsteps in the woods, like running towards me, and then they'd stop. I'd shine my flashlight and there's nothing there. And this happened like a half dozen times, to the point where I was like growling and like trying to, because I thought it was coyotes, you know, or something like that. But it was like the whole time, the whole like 10-minute walk, this thing is, whatever it was, is coming up as close to me as I can, just out of sight, over and over again. And I know that there's been an episode of Finding Bigfoot down at the Yellow River Forest, and both of these encounters are less than 10 miles from there. And I have another friend who's had an encounter. This is further over in Iowa by Decorah, which is about 35 miles. And I've had an encounter in that same area too, like a pebbles being thrown.
Tell me about that.
I was camping at this area. I stayed there for like 4 or 5 days, and it's called Lower Dam. It's like a state, not like a state park, but it's like a state forest area, but not an actual traveled one. There's an old dam there, but so I was night fishing on the corner. There's like a logging road that runs probably 75 feet above your head, and on the hillside behind you. And I'm on this little corner at the kind of where the edge of the bank of the river on the Iowa River meets up with the hillside, and I'm sitting there, and something kept on rolling pebbles down the hill behind me. And this happened 5 or 6 times. And it obviously could have been other animals, but at the time I had a road flare, and I fired up a road flare and held it up and tried to see what it was, and didn't see anything. And after the road flare went out, about 15 minutes later, it started happening again.
Oh, wow.
Now, there's not any animals in the woods that aren't afraid of, like, because when you pull one of them, or when you pull the string out of them road flares, it sounds like a gun going off. And it's super bright.
Yeah.
And so there's not any animals in the woods that I know of that aren't afraid of something like that. No, and there was a beaver that was in like on the corner in front of me. He took off immediately. Like, he disappeared immediately after the road flares. So you know that other animals, other ungulates and stuff like that, herbivores, they're totally afraid of something like that, and they won't go anywhere near it. But this happened for another, probably an hour that night. And my friend, his encounter, he was canoeing in that exact same area, and they got behind. They took too long of a trip, basically, and it started to get dark. And they heard something up on top of the hillside next to them come crashing towards them through the brush. And then he heard what the most closely resembles the Ohio howl.
Yeah.
In the woods. And it apparently it chased him for quite a while.
While he was in the canoe?
Yep, him and his girlfriend.
Have you had any other experiences with paranormal or UFOs or anything?
I've seen 5 UFOs, actually. And I had a witness every single time as well. So the first encounter actually happened less than a mile from where I had my Bigfoot encounter. 3 of my friends used to, around here is kind of one of the things that we all did was we would get a case of beer and go on tour all night and just drive around. And we were parked at a field driveway about a mile up the same road, Columbus Road, from where I had my Bigfoot encounter. And the 3 of us were looking up at the sky, and all of a sudden this, what we thought was a star originally, a really bright star, zipped across the sky, and then it zipped back. And then it zipped back across the sky another time, and all of us said at the same time, "What the hell is that?" And then it shot straight up in the air and disappeared.
So it went in one direction and then just immediately went back in the opposite direction.
Yeah, like faster than any plane or anything is capable of. Not even the drones that they have now could do something like that. I mean, it was like instantaneously. You could just see, it was like a meteor shooting across the sky, but then it just stopped. And it did that 3 or 4 times, and then it shot straight up in the air and disappeared. Like you could see a white, it's just a bright pinpoint of white light.
Huh.
And you could see the trail coming off of it as it went straight up. And you could see the trail coming off of it as it zipped back and forth too. That was the first encounter. The second one is not really anything to speak of. It was more of we were coming back from Waukon, which is like 17 miles from Lansing, and we were on this road, Iron Mine Road, just outside of Lansing, and there was, the best way I could describe it would be like a Chinese lantern, but it was following us, and it followed us all the way down that road, which is like 3 miles, and it's a highway, so we're going full speed. So this thing had to be moving pretty quickly to follow us, but I lost sight of it after we turned. The third encounter, this one chronologically happened before the first 2, now that I think about it, but when I was a kid, we were walking down Main Street, and me and my buddy Squirrel, and we looked up, and I saw, the best way I can describe this one is like 2 stainless steel toilets flipped like bowl to bowl, so the bowls are so it's like an orb in the middle with like a tank on each side. And this was in broad daylight, and we saw it in the sky. I pointed it out to him, and we followed it walked around the corner so that we could see it better, and it just slowly cruised down behind the hill. The biggest, the most insane one, the one that really throws me off is I was taking care of my friend who had a heart attack and then had messed up his back. And basically he couldn't hardly get out of bed, but I was staying at his house, and his house is right along the Mississippi, overlooking what's known as Big Lake. And I was looking out the window, and I saw this little white point of light, almost like a more intense version of a firefly, but like much brighter and more pure white light. And it wasn't disappearing; it was just zipping around almost like a bug would. But it was like zipping around over this big, mile area of water, and it was like shooting around, kind of very similar to the first encounter that I told you about, the way it was moving. But I was like, all right, I got to see if this is just something messing with my head. And I realized that I had my binoculars with me. So I pulled out my binoculars and I looked at it and got it, focused in on it, and could see that it was exactly what I thought it was. It was just this little point of white light zipping around. And so I was like, oh, maybe it's just a reflection on the window or something playing tricks on me. So I went outside and looked at it. And right when I did, when I focused in on it the second time, it split into 2. And one side kept doing the same thing that it was doing before and looked almost the same but slightly smaller. And the other side turned into like a cloud of smaller versions of itself that kind of floated along. And I said, holy shit, it knows that I'm watching it. And right when I said that, it slammed back together and shot straight up in the air and disappeared.
Wow.
Yeah. And the most recent one, the last one that I had was with my friend, and we were in my backyard working with my forge, and I looked up and I saw a cylindrical UFO hovering right above us in broad daylight. And so he was in the garage, like right behind me. And so I ran in and I was like, dude, you gotta come out here. You gotta come see this. He was like, what? What's the big deal? I was like, just come out here. You gotta see this. And I pointed it out to him. He's like, holy crap, what is that? And it was just like, it almost kind of seemed like a dirigible, like rigid, like a balloon. But it was like bright silver. And it hovered above us for probably 30 minutes or better. And then it kind of just slowly lumbered off and disappeared.
And it was cylindrical in shape, like the Tic Tac or cigar shaped UFOs that people talk about?
Kind of like, the best way to describe it would be like a 50-gallon drum, like shape, but it was more expanded in the middle, like it was larger in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there was what seemed like kind of like on the top of a barrel, like a wooden barrel, how they have a ring around the top edge and bottom edge.
Uh-huh.
Kind of like that, but it wrapped around the top of it. And it was a slightly different shade of metal, like the metal, like it had a different polish on it or something like that.
And you say it was silver. Was it like reflective metallic looking or like brushed metal or? Kind
of like brushed aluminum, like not like super reflective, not like chrome, but still shiny.
Yeah.
Like you could see light reflecting off of it still.
Did you hear any sounds or anything?
No sound whatsoever.
But the one that you saw over the water, you had the definite impression that it knew you were looking at it.
It right when I said it, I said, it knows I'm watching it. Right when I said that, it slammed back together. The two halves formed back into one, and it shot straight up like so quick. It was like a snap of a finger.
That's just mind blowing. What do you think about that? I mean, what do you think you were witnessing? Do you think it's like alien technology or what?
It reminded me so much of the Tic Tac, like the descriptions of the Tic Tac.
Mm-hmm.
Like just this bright or similar, like I'm not sure if it was a Tic Tac or Go Fast, but one of them was like this bright point of light. And it was just, it moved in ways that the crafts that we have today can't move.
Yeah.
Like, or that we know of anyway. It's what we're being told.
One of the interesting things about what you're saying is it sounds like each one of them were kind of different.
Yeah. Only the first one that I mentioned and the last one that I mentioned, or the second to last one, the one over Big Lake and the first one were similar. They were just similar in the way that they moved around, but they weren't like similar in size at all. Like the first one that I mentioned was way brighter. Like it looked like the brightest star in the sky, basically.
Right.
But then it just moved. Like I say, every single one of them that I've had a witness there. So it wasn't just me that was seeing it, you know.
Right. There's a big, Senate hearing about UFO disclosure today.
Yeah, I was just watching it, actually.
Yeah, it's all over the news, man. It's crazy times for sure. Do you ever think they would ever do that with Bigfoot?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, honestly, like a lot of the 411 stuff that you hear about,
mm-hmm.
I think that they know, just based on the discrepancies with the FBI's handling of it, or like the one case with the missing child where the military came in and searched for him, but they were completely separate from the FBI and the Park Service, so they were all working separate operations and not connected with each other, or not speaking with each other. That doesn't make any sense.
No, it don't.
I know that the government is compartmentalized, but you would think that on something like a missing child, that they would be united in trying to find the child.
Oh, for sure. They would have one person that would be in charge of the search, whoever it be, and then everybody would be working in unison.
Yeah. And there's multiple different occurrences where that was not the case, which is what makes me think that there's a cover-up.
So if we go with that assumption that there is a cover-up and that Bigfoot is responsible for at least some of the missing person cases, why do you think Bigfoot are taking people?
I've heard a lot of theories on that. There's the guy who got abducted up in, I think it was British Columbia,
mm-hmm.
and they took him into their family and were like they were keeping him hostage.
Mm-hmm.
Like I kind of wonder if it isn't some sort of breeding thing. Like we're so close in species that maybe we can interbreed.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's because there's been stories of women getting abducted and assaulted, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder if it isn't something to do with that. Or I know with primates, they will kill other primates, other smaller primates, like gorillas will kill monkeys or chimpanzees because they view them as competition. And that's a possibility too, I think.
I know in Africa, there's reports of baboons stealing human children out of the home.
Yep, and that happens in India too.
That's terrifying to think about.
No kidding, right?
I mean, I guess it would be on the same level, but like just the idea of like a Bigfoot doing it seems even more terrifying for some reason.
Yeah. Well, there's been instances of like human children being raised by wolves. There was the wolf man or whatever that was, I can't remember where it was, but he was basically raised by wolves and like was totally feral. I kind of think that there may be a population of feral people out there too. There's been a lot of stories about that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as many stories as there are of all these different things, there's no way that, if you look at the law of averages, there has to be some truth to some of them. They can't all be lying.
You know, I used to hear stories here in Oklahoma of a particular family that had some children that, the rumor was that these kids had some Bigfoot blood in them and that they were part Bigfoot.
I wouldn't doubt it. There was a story of up in, I think it was Northwest Territory, of they basically found a woman that was like half Bigfoot, there was a woman that was abducted and raped, and then she had a child, and it was half Bigfoot.
I mean, that's just mind blowing to think about. It could have just been small town rumor, in fairness. I never met the people or anything, but they even said that like the children were very feral acting and really wild, beyond, a normal small child being all crazy and whatnot. But they had really thick pads on the bottom of their feet, and that they even tried to have the pads like surgically removed, and they just grew back.
Wild.
Yeah.
See, that would be pretty sound genetic evidence.
Yeah, but I mean, small town Oklahoma, a small close-knit Native American community like that's never going to make it to the genetic lab.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so many stories from the Native Americans. Like, they're just everywhere. There's stories all over the entire world, not just the United States. You got the Yowie, the Yaren, Orang Pendek. It's definitely not just the North America, and it's definitely not just, and it's all the indigenous peoples of the entire world, basically. They have stories of them.
So what do you think Bigfoot is? I mean, I know that everybody always gets asked that, especially, on podcasts, but what are your thoughts?
To be honest, I used to think that it was probably just an unknown primate species, but now I'm kind of torn between, like, is this the giants of the Bible that they were talking about? Like, are they part of the giants that survived the Great Flood? But I still think, just based on my experience, I still think they're obviously a primate species of some sort. I don't know. After thinking about my experience more, I kind of believe more in the whole infrasound, like the whole what tigers do.
Yeah.
Theory, and that explains kind of why it almost is like my memory was wiped about the rest of the day. I do think they're a flesh and blood creature, but there's been a lot of stories about supernatural stuff going along with them too. So it's really hard to say.
Yeah, man, it is. There's just so much, just a wide range of experiences that people have whenever it comes to this. And, back in the day, I was kind of like you, I just thought, oh, well, this is at the most some undiscovered primate, a big ape out in the woods.
Gigantopithecus.
Yeah, but then as time went on, I was like, no, if it was just a big orangutan, we had already have one. We had already bagged one. We would have been able to figure that out. But And then you hear the different paranormal stuff, and it's just, I don't even know what to think anymore. I've definitely talked to enough people who have experienced, something paranormal whenever it came to these things that not all of them are lying, Some of these people are very honest, very genuine people. So I don't know what these are.
I don't know either. That's kind of I think that's part of what interests me so much about them is that after my experience, I know they're here, but I don't have a clue exactly what they are. Whether it's an offshoot of Gigantopithecus or Neanderthals crossbreeding with apes or if it's the giants or, there's so many possibilities.
Well, whatever it is, it's definitely a mystery, and they are everywhere, including Iowa.
Oh, yeah. Especially this region of Iowa. I don't know if you've ever heard about the Driftless region or not much, but it's basically untouched wilderness. It's trees as far as the eye can see, most of it.
The only stuff I've heard from Iowa, I actually had a really good friend from Iowa. He went by Tizzle. His name was Richard. And he lived in a small town called Bridgewater, outside of Des Moines, down in the south. Pretty much just farmland down there, with some creek bottoms and stuff. But, they had patches of woods here and there. And whenever he was young, him and his friends were, I think, out swimming in a creek or something, and they saw one watching them from the opposite creek bank, kind of on down the creek a ways. And it took off, and they went over there, and they found tracks that had left, but the tracks were three-toed.
Weird.
Yeah, I found that really interesting.
I just heard a story about a four-toed one last night. I wonder if it isn't because I know there were some of the tracks, some of the Meldrum tracks or Cliff Brackman's cast that you couldn't see, like two of the toads were kind of almost fused together, it looked like.
Yeah.
I wonder if it isn't something like that. But then you look at the tracks from the Yeti.
Mm-hmm.
Those looked like they had the antipose thumb or whatever, where the thumb sticks off to the side.
Yeah.
So I think there could be a lot of different genetic variations,
Do you think we're dealing with more than one thing, or are they all the same?
I think that they're the same basic species, but I think they're slight different genetic variations. Just like humans are.
Mm-hmm.
It's like gigantism appears in people, 20 generations after their great grandfather had it. So I think it's dominant and recessive gene type of stuff.
Yeah, I find that kind of interesting as well, that within humans, we have cases of gigantism, and we have cases where, there's genetic disorders where, your body's covered in hair.
Yeah.
I find that really interesting.
I just, some of the places that in the woods around here, it's pretty sparsely populated. The biggest town that's close by is La Crosse, and that's 100,000 people. That's still 35 miles away. There's woods around here. There's hillsides that don't get walked, but maybe once or twice a year, mushroom hunting season and deer season. And it would not be hard for a large predator to hide out. I mean, they're obviously almost on the same intelligence level as we are. If they're that good at hiding, it wouldn't be hard for them to disappear. The woods are so thick around here, you can't see 35 feet in front of you.
Whenever you start hearing skeptical people talking about how, well, we would see them all the time, or they wouldn't be able to stay hidden, there's not enough space in some of the areas people are talking about. I don't think they really understand that you don't need that much space. You just have to stay out of sight. You just have to be smart enough to not be seen.
Yeah. And, the wood knocking and the rock clacking and the whooping, I think that's all a warning. That's a warning, oh, somebody's here, let's get out of here. And then they're gone.
Yeah.
I think that they're afraid of humans because they've been basically run out of the areas that they live in. I think that's why you have so many instances where people will have their houses slapped and harassed, and it's when people start moving their houses into where their territory is, the prime hunting habitat is usually where people camp or where they put a house. There's a clearing. Oh, look at this beautiful clearing. Let's put a house here. Well, that beautiful clearing was where they hunted every night for deer.
Yeah.
And now you've just taken it away from them. I think that's where you get a lot more of the aggressive ones. I think the males and the females would be the males would be more aggressive than the females, just because the females rearing children and having to take care of them, they would be much more likely to be decent or to be, not aggressive towards humans.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's really interesting, man. A lot of the theories out there, whenever you start breaking these things down, a lot of it makes a lot of sense.
I agree. Especially when you start comparing primate behavior, like gorilla behavior, to them. You see so many parallels. It's just, if it's not that, I don't know what the hell, why they act the way they do, or why so many people report them acting the way they do.
Well, man, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with me.
Hey, that's all right, man. I appreciate you giving me a chance to share my story.
And if you've had your own run-in with something you can't explain, send me an email at bigfootcrossroads@gmail.com. Check out the website, bigfootcrossroads.com. You can find links to the social media, a contact form, and links to the merchandise, which I just posted recently. The brand new logo done by the amazing Jonathan Dodd. You can now get a t-shirt of that. And until next time, remember, there's something in the woods.